See whether you can save yourself. I am going to kill you and destroy you. It was an impersonal voice. When I was born, I was a tender baby. You imprisoned my parents, chained them. I don't think the world has seen such a cruelty which Kamsa has evidenced. With all that, up to now I am alive. Now you think, by inviting me for the Dhanur Yaga, I can be undone. Let us see who is going to be true and who is going to be successful. So he accepted the invitation and went there. The first encounter was with Kuvalayapidam, such a huge tusker, made ready to charge at Krishna and smash him in no time. Nothing could be done. Krishna plucked the two tusks, put them on the shoulder, and straightaway walked into the wrestling arena. Encountered both of them. Jumped over to where Kamsa was seated in the gallery, killed him also. This is what happened. Kamsa's story ended there. But the course of events did not end. Jarasandha's daughter was married to Kamsa. So Jarasandha was the father-in-law of Kamsa. And what has happened? With the death of Kamsa, Jarasandha's daughter became a widow. He could not take the event lying down. He decided to avenge what Krishna did, his loss. So Jarasandha decided to attack Mathura. And you know, he came with 23 Akshauhinis of Sena. The Mahabharata Yuddha was fought with 18 Akshauhinis. And he came alone. From one side it was 23. In the case of Mahabharata war, Duryodhana had 11 and Pandavas 7, both together 18. Here with 23 Akshauhinis of warriors, he came himself. Can you imagine? And on this side, who are there? Krishna is there, Balarama is there. One is the might of men, another is the power of the soul. These are the two things that were encountering each other. You can imagine. This is a great text, my dear souls. This is how you are told about the inner power of the human being. We have a limited body which completes its growth at the age of maximum 21. Then the body is stopped. It has stopped its growth. From the next moment onwards, it begins to decline. Then what is the growth that you will have? Enrichment, etc. It can only be of the spiritual mind and the spiritual intelligence. Why do I call the mind and intelligence spiritual? Because our body is matter and energy aggregate. The mind is different from the body. The intelligence also. The body cannot think, matter cannot understand. But the mind has feelings, sensations, emotions, memory, knowledge, thought and what not. The intelligence has understanding. These are not epithets or properties of the mind and matter. That is why I call them spiritual, to distinguish them from matter and energy. So we have got the spiritual mind and the spiritual intelligence. The entire growth of human is in the inner personality, consisting of mind and intelligence. I would like you to tell your children, right from the age of 2 or 3, my dear child, you have a body, but you are not the body. You have a body, but you are not the body. You are not the body. You have a body. You know that I have a body. What is this I which says I have a body? It is not the body, something else. That I is the supreme soul, understanding. Mind is its expression. Intelligence is mind's own refined expression. Tell them in this manner. This is how you initiate the discussion. You make people spiritual in this manner. Understand that our body is an instrument, a possession, like a house in which I live. I am not the house, I live in the house. I put on my dress, but I am not the dress. Understand it very clearly, very clearly. So Jarasandha came with 23 Akshauhinis of warriors. And he wanted to attack and sweep through everything. This is the first time that Mathura was coming under the siege of Jarasandha. Krishna and Balarama, without any thinking, without any further preparation, they decided to go in two aerial chariots to face them. On seeing Krishna, young, Jarasandha, the father-in-law of Krishna's uncle, are you able to relate? The father-in-law of Kamsa, Kamsa is the uncle of Krishna. So you can understand how small Krishna was and how big Jarasandha was. When both of them went there, Jarasandha, after all, he was a great man, a great asura in his own manner. So he looked at both of them and said, Krishna, you are a child and you are a coward. You are given only to stealthy practices. I am not. I am not going to fight with you. Not only that, you killed your uncle. Nobody should do it. So you are so immoral and rascalish. You had no qualms in killing your own uncle. And you are a coward. You are also a cowherd. I am not going to fight with you. If your brother Balarama wants to fight with me, I am ready. Ask him and let him decide. If he wants to give a combat, I am ready. The fight started. Krishna and Balarama started fighting and destroyed the whole army. All the 23 Akshahunis were completely vanquished. Can you imagine? By whom? By Krishna and Balarama. Finally, what happened? Jarasandha alone survived. Balarama caught hold of him and he took his plough to hit him on his head. Right then Krishna went, caught hold of his hand. My dear brother, don't kill him, save him. Balarama left him. Jarasandha left. When he was not killed, naturally he had to go away. When he moved to a distance, Krishna murmured to the brother, you know why I told him? Let him go. He will again muster 23 Akshahunis and come back. And let him come back as many times as are necessary. So our problem is less. Mustering the wicked people, another wicked leader is necessary. So as the wicked leader, he will bring all the wicked people like one moth bringing thousands of the others, and then we will face them. If we kill him, the whole attempt will be in vain. Our purpose in this life is to destroy all the wicked people and relieve the earth of the undesirable load. It will not be served if we kill him right now. Balarama understood. He accepted. Whatever is said and done, Jarasandha went there with such a huge army. And he could not do anything so far as Krishna and Balarama were concerned. A very grown-up man, an adult, a super adult, fighting with two little boys. Nothing happened. It was so shameful to Jarasandha for his reputation, for his past, for his fighting and battling excellence. So he was so humiliated that he wanted to do penance. Penance. No more ruling, nothing. I want to do penance. But all the relatives came around him and said, no, do not lose hope. You may have lost once. You are after all the Kshatriya spirited person. We should not retreat from war like this. Don't do penance in retreat. Let us try again. So he regained his consciousness. He was inspired and instigated. He started collecting further army, trained them, recruited them, emergency recruitment and all that, and finally came again with 23 Akshahunis. The second war also took place. The same story repeated. And Jarasandha went back. But he had no problem because he had already encountered this and undergone the thoughts of penance, and finally everything was all right. So he agreed. He came 17 times he was defeated. No different outcome. Jarasandha's army itself will come to 10 crores, about 10 crores. What about the warriors who fought in the Mahabharata war? What about the others who fought in different places, including Narakasura? So it will come to a stupendous figure, something like 10 to 15 crores of people Krishna had destroyed. Now, the 18th time, what did Narada do? Narada went and prompted Kala Yavana to come and attack the Yadavas. So he also came, and Jarasandha also came. Finding both of them siege Mathura, Krishna felt that this is going to be troublesome. Suppose we go to encounter Kalayavana, then Jarasandha will attack us. Suppose we go and encounter Jarasandha, then Kalayavana will come. So we must evolve a methodology by virtue of which Mathura has to be saved. So he emergently decided to build Dwaraka. And Vishwakarma did the magic. He, with his special architectural skill, built Dwaraka. And help from various quarters came. You know, the manner in which Srimad Bhagavatam describes it. Help came from various quarters. Anything in this human world, especially meant for a societal cause, for a societal objective, has to be shared by as many people as possible. It is not like a family member. A child is born in a family as the pet child of the parents. They will live in their own manner. But there is a social objective, especially like a war or the safety of people. Anything that you do to the welfare, to the goodness, to the promotion, to the felicity of the people, the society at large, it cannot be done by an individual, should not be also. You should throw the venue open to as many people as possible. We always say when Srimad Bhagavatam has to be read or recited in the form of a Saptaham or a Bhagavata Tattva Samiksha Satram, as we are performing in Naimisharanya every year in December. In ancient times they used to say, get upon an elephant, beat the drum, and then announce that something so holy, great, pious, and redeeming, rewarding is going to take place. Come all of you, bathe in the nectarine waters of Srimad Bhagavatam. You have to say like that. Understand that it is not an individual affair. It's not a family affair. So the entire Mathura had to be saved in an emergent situation. So all people started helping them. This is something that all people will have to emulate. How Krishna built his Dwaraka, in the same manner you also will have to help any kind of a social venture. See, we are doing this telecast series. Millions of rupees have already been spent for this cause. Do you think an ashram or a Swami will be able to afford it? Then how are we doing it? Only because others will help, and we expect also there will be liberal participation from the viewers. That is the only way. So suddenly Krishna led all his people safely to Dwaraka and asked Balarama, his brother, to look after the people and be safe. This Dwaraka itself extended to 12 yojana square in the sea. 12 yojana means 1 yojana is about 9 miles. So altogether in kilometers you will find it is 173.8 kilometers square. It works out to 30,000 square kilometers. This is the extent of the land Dwaraka had. Now, after entrusting the entire population, Dwaraka people, to the care of the brother, you look after it. You look after the whole land. And Krishna said, I will go and face Kalayavana. What did he do? He went without any weapon. In the Mahabharata war, Krishna had said, I will not wield any weapon. Not at all. He went with this Sudarshana Chakra alone and the Shankha Panchajanya he had. Both of them were not supposed to be weapons. Sudarshana Chakra, it is meant to preserve the revolution in the world, the chakra of the world. So he went. Here also he goes. All that he did was, he wore a lotus garland. You know, the lotus, it always indicates purity. And whoever wears a lotus garland, you cannot take him as an easy person. He doesn't have any belligerent mood, attacking mood or anything like that. So with that garland on his neck, he started walking towards Yavana. Seeing the young Krishna walking barefooted and only with a garland, no bow, no arrow, no chariot. You know, Kalevana thought, I will not be on a chariot and I will not have weapons. So he got down from the chariot and started walking without any weapon. When Kalevana approached him, who was this Yavana? He was a foreign fighter. He had a lot of additional and unknown skills unknown to the Indian people, and his might was very severe. He thought that I can simply run and catch hold of Krishna. He is only that much. My 2 arms will be sufficient. So when Kalevana started running, Krishna also started running. Kalevana behind and Krishna in front. You know, Krishna ran in such a manner. This is where you have to appreciate and understand and also emulate the expedient measures Krishna uses on different occasions. So, Krishna ran in such a manner that every step this Yavana thought he is within my reach. Almost he will touch the heels. Like that he started running. Both of them ran. And Krishna cleverly managed to take him to a cave. And he entered the cave. Yavana also entered. Krishna suddenly disappeared. After all, when 2 people came, there must have been some confusion. Muchukunda was sleeping there. And he was sleeping there in a very special condition. And when his sleep was disturbed and he got up, when he looked at Yavana, he was completely burnt. That was a special blessing that Muchukunda had. So Kalevana was met in this manner. Why did Krishna take to this expediency? What made him get away from all the weapons and other things? Put only a garland and go. And why did he make Kalevana run after him? And why he was also running? If you look at it, Krishna was trying to escape. Out of fear he was running. But he was not running out of fear. He told already his brother that Kalevana will have to be encountered not with military strength. We will use some other method and we will get another person to kill him. Clearly saying this, he had gone. So it was an expedient measure that he adopted. And every time he gave the feeling that he was within the reach of Yavana. And then he disappeared. When Muchukunda looked at him, he was all gone. You know, this running of Krishna, escaping as if in fear, this is particularly remembered and reminisced by the devotees. And it becomes a huge question. Why did Krishna do this? And Krishna's life consists of so many such conflicts and contradictions. So many conflicts and contradictions. He always adopts very skillful means, expedient to the occasion. He is not very rigid at all. In Krishna you will find absolute flexibility to the very core. We were discussing how profound and even paradoxical Krishna's life was. In Hinduism we have the famous Trinity, as we call it. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the dissolver or destroyer. Now these 3 are imaginary deities. I would like you to understand it very well. They are imaginary creations. To explain how the process of creation, the process of sustenance, and the process of destruction simultaneously go on to preserve this world. It is not that the world is born all at once and there it ends. It is not so. Creation is a continuous process. Preservation also is, and equally so destruction. In our own body you will find newer and newer cells are created every day, millions and trillions of them. They are equally destroyed. The body is preserved for quite a few decades. The same applies to the world or creation as a whole. Now, while Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwara, the Trinity, they are imaginary deities, we have non-imaginary personalities in us. One is Rama of Treta Yuga and Krishna of Dwapara Yuga. If you take away the lives of Rama and Krishna, I wonder whether Hinduism will have anything worth remembering or even following or listening to. Now in Krishna's life, unlike in dramas, you will find a lot of dexterity, skillfulness and expediency adopted and implemented. Krishna's life is the life of a very efficient, powerful, skillful administrator. I think our present day administration, the whole government and the administrators have a great deal to learn from Krishna's life. Let us not take him for the religious or spiritual value that he represents. Keep that part away. If only our administrators are as efficient, as insightful and as expedient as Krishna was, I think a lot of orderliness can be brought about in our country. We are having so many different types of assaults from inside, assaults from outside also. This is a country which was under subjugation and foreign domination for quite a number of centuries. Now we are free to some extent, but our freedom is circumscribed by a number of internal and also external forces. Unless we have the Krishna insight, the Krishna excellence and expediency, we will not be able to meet all the challenges. In this context, I believe our people, particularly our legislators, parliamentarians, the executive as a whole, the entire administrative machinery, even judiciary, will have to learn a lot from Krishna's life. Because he was a very efficient and oriented for timely insight in the matter of executing various propositions and achieving goals, there is a number of contradictions in his life. These contradictions are even now there. But during Krishna's time also, these contradictions had become a subject of deep introspection and discussion for the people. Here is a reference to it in the third skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Uddhava speaks to Vidura. This is verse number 16 of the fourth chapter of the third skandha. Karmanyanihasya bhavo bhavasyate durgashrayo atharibhayat palayanam kalatmanaschayat kalatmano yad pramadayutashraya swatmandratehe khidyati dhir vidamiha. Uddhava, a faithful, obedient devotee of Krishna, he is making this kind of a confession or a description about his master. Karmani anihasya bhavo bhavasyate. Karmani anihasya. Anihasya means a man who is not given to any desire or desire-oriented activity at all. So far as Krishna is concerned, he has nothing to gain in this world. Nanavaptam avaptavyam, he specifically says about himself in Bhagavad Gita. Vartayeva cha karmani. Though I have nothing to achieve in this world, yet I remain faithfully and wholesomely active. Though he is without any desire and he has no motivation for achieving anything in this world, karmani, a variety of heroic adventures he has taken up. Why? For what reason? Generally, all activities are proceeding from desire, ambition, aspiration. When these are not there, no one will be tempted to or persuaded to take up any activity. But in the case of Krishna, it is not so. So on the one hand, you are desire-free, my dear Lord, and on the other hand, you are steeped in multifarious activities. Bhavo abhavasyate. You are a man who has got no worldliness at all, no connection with worldliness. At the same time, you are running a huge household. 16,008 wives you have. What a huge city Dwaraka was. And how many households he was managing. Srimad Bhagavata describes Krishna's household life. There you will find a number of sons-in-law are being received. A number of daughters are being sent away after marriage. The whole Dwaraka was always crowded by in-laws, quite a number of them. Karmanyanihasya bhavo abhavasyate. To run a small, simple household, how difficult and problematic it is for the householders of the present. In contrast, you think what a huge household Krishna's was, and with no problem, fatigue or tiredness he was managing it. Not only that, as I have mentioned earlier, he had already lived 125 years. Is it a small length of period? Certainly not. How is it that it is possible? Durgashrayo atharibhayat palayanam kalatmano. You are actually even the soul of time. Time brings about all destructions, all birth, everything. So you are even the soul of time, means the very essence and the controller of time. For such a person, what kind of a fear can there be? Now what has actually happened? Durgashrayaha, fearing Jarasandha, you decided to have a huge palace within the sea, Dwaraka, and you took all the people from Mathura to the Dwaraka city. Only because you are afraid of Jarasandha. Atha aribhayat palayanam. You started running away from Kalayavana. Will anybody run away from an enemy? You are one who can face any number of enemies. But from one enemy, you decided to run. And after running away, you entered the cave and disappeared. Muchukunda was sleeping there. His sleep was disturbed. When he woke up, the enemy who had intruded completely got burnt into ashes. That was your method you adopted. Could you not have confronted him directly? You did not do it. So this is another contradiction.